Right, hi everybody. I think that's ample time. I'm not sure how long this is going to take. It depends how much you speak. It's got to be said. My name is Peter Rowlett. It's a little bit confusing. I work for the Math Stats Noah network, who are at the bottom of the screen there. Sorry, lights down. Better? So I work for the Math Stats Noah network on a project in HE Curriculum Innovation in the Mathematical Sciences strand of the National HE STEM programme. If that's not clear, see me afterwards. Anyway, so I'm recording this as a bit of an experiment, so if you don't want to be recorded, don't say anything. But it's only here, so you might not, probably won't get picked up anyway. Right. Describe for me mathematics teaching at university. Sorry?
Chalk and talk.
Chalk and talk, very good.
Which universities?
Well, your university.
You mean undergraduate teaching?
I do.
It's like lectures.
Yeah? So lots of lectures, lots of chalk and talk.
One person stands at the front and talks to the whole room.
Yep, someone stands at the front and talks like I'm doing. I'm asking you to answer back though. Does that happen very often?
It's not really interactive.
Not interactive.
You get example sheets and you don't really do.
Yep, you get example sheets. Yes, you get example sheets and you definitely go away and do them. Yeah. I can't tell who's speaking, but that sounds very exciting. Hi, where are you?
Warwick.
Okay, good. Supervisions in groups of 4 or 5? Yeah. What about assessment? How are these things assessed? Exams? Exams? Lots of homework. So are you sent away with, when it's homework, is it short problems that you solve? Is it long problems? Is it?
It tends to be short.
Tends to be short.
So you get a problem. It's assignment sheets you get, so 3 or 4 problems.
Yeah, three or four problems to do that week and then some more next week. So you don't tend to get given a piece of in-depth work? Okay, a limited amount. So, good, right, I'll see if there's anything else I was going to say. Group work, you said groups of 4 or 5. Is that a sort of tutorial situation, do you think? Or
It's normally a postgrad or 4th year, it takes a group of first years.
yeah,
They basically go through the assignments and go through how many problems. So it's a mix between sort of pastoral and tutorial rather than
Yeah.
and they that's supervising the mark most of the work.
right, I see, okay. So that's, yeah, sort of small group, tutorial, pastoral, academic. But not working in groups and handing in a piece of work together. Hello.
So the first year at Birmingham sometimes do.
Okay, first years at Birmingham sometimes do that.
And the session lasts for an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Right?
And they have to hand in a piece of work at the end. They're working on time.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. So a session of an hour and a half, I'm saying it again for the recording and also for people who can't hear you. A session of an hour and a half, and at the end of it, the group has worked together to produce something that they hand in. So it isn't a takeaway thing, it isn't a many weeks or whatever. Okay, that's interesting.
It's certainly encouragement to work together.
Yeah?
I know in the lines here, the students are always sort of encouraged to work together.
Okay, so students are encouraged to take the individual work away and work together on it on their own. I keep knocking this thing. That's good. There you are. Okay, so extracurricular things might be like that, but yes. Okay, good. Oh, yes.
Support classes for lectures, like optional support classes.
Okay, optional support. So this is you take your problems with that particular lecture along to an optional class. Yeah, okay. Anyone want to describe a first class student? Someone who knows how to do exams quite well. Very good.
I guess someone who doesn't quite know, I mean, they might know how to sort of solve these problems, but they writing mathematics well is, I don't know, something that usually people
Okay, so they know how to solve the problems, but they don't know how to express that.
Right.
Write that down very
Yeah.
well. Okay, that's interesting. It's not quite the answer I was expecting from you.
Somebody who can actually think by himself and most probably could solve problem.
Okay,
Wasn't taught how
So-
to do.
somebody who can think for themselves, can solve problems that they weren't taught how to solve. Unexpected, unseen problems,
Yeah.
slightly outside of what they've seen. That's a first-class student. Okay. Who is that? Someone who can remember Bruce?
I misunderstood the first class.
Yes.
I thought as in their first class, day one.
Oh, I see. No. Right. So on day one they can solve it, but they can't. Yes. Yes, okay. Okay, good. Where are we? Same?
They wait for you to do something on the board and then copy it.
Okay, they wait for you to do something on the board, then they copy it. Hi. Very quiet in classes, okay?
They probably try to solve problems in a very standard way and would have unlimited ability to go beyond that and solve problems that require non-standard techniques.
Okay, so they're used to doing the standard techniques, they're not used to going beyond that, thinking for themselves, that sort of thing.
And they are often not very good at realizing when those standard techniques can be applied to problems that are slightly different from what are given lectures.
Okay, that's very interesting. So they're not very good at knowing when the standard techniques can be applied to other sorts of problems that don't look exactly like the one in lectures.
They,
Yeah.
the way they write the work
Yeah.
makes it a lot easier for them to make mistakes. They write things up sloppily and they make mistakes.
That's very interesting. I have a slide like this later. So they write things up sloppily, it's very easy for them to make mistakes. That's very good.
And it's hard for them to tell where they went wrong.
And it's hard for them to tell where they went wrong because they haven't written it out in an ordered way. Okay. Good. What makes a good PhD student? So I think everyone here is either a PhD student or a postdoc, right? I'm getting nods. So what makes a good PhD student? Going to conferences, well done. But why is that? Is that networking, presenting? Networking and presenting. Those are good things in a PhD student. Willing to ask questions, okay.
Reading 5 papers a day.
Reading 5 papers a day, okay.
Drinking 5 pints of beer in the pub and then you can do a good excuse in the morning.
Lots of beer, right.
I would say
Ability.
ability
Yeah.
being able to communicate with other people.
So being able to communicate with other people, who? With other mathematicians?
With other mathematicians.
Yeah, okay. I'm not seeing you again, but motivation and enthusiasm, hi. Okay, motivation and enthusiasm, very good.
Being
So
able to bang your head against the wall for 10 hours just in hope that you get somewhere.
that's a very interesting comment. Banging your head for 10 hours against the wall, hoping you'll get somewhere.
Being able to write it all down at the end.
And being able to write it all down at the end. Do you put your hand up? Do you want to?
But I was going to say also motivation and discipline.
Okay, motivation and discipline, that's good.
Being meticulous.
Being meticulous, okay. So what about working undirected? Taking a piece of work away and working on it, yeah? Yes, people are nodding. Initiative, very good. Okay. How do you find out, how do you get onto a PhD? Luck. Doesn't involve getting a... Are you in a better place if you get a first-class degree, is what I'm asking. So first-class degree students are good at regurgitating proof and blah, 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 and then when they become PhD students, they're independent workers and self-motivating and... Yeah? So a few people are laughing. I think you see my point. Right, I think now I'm going to actually say something to you. Right, let me go over here. Oh, dear. It wants to connect to Bluetooth. That's not good. It didn't like me walking away. Right, so some of you who've been past my stall today will have seen this black book, which I have 7 copies of, so the first few people down the front can take one. This is called Maths at University, Reflections on Experience, Practice and Provision. This was funded by a project called More Maths Grads, which was a precursor to the National HE STEM programme that ran the last few years. And what they did was they went to basically 4 universities, different types, and did some in-depth interviews with some massive number of students. It's ridiculous to sum up a very good and very diverse and very interesting book in 2 bullet points, but anyway, so I call that relevant key findings. 1, your students are not like you. Okay, so what I didn't ask was about typical students. I asked about typical students and first-class students and PhD students, and how many would you say go on to be PhD students? So out of an undergraduate population, how many would go on to do a PhD? 5%? Okay. Yes, depends on the university. But that's essentially, it's a very small number, and that's the people who then become, a smaller number again will become academics, and they're the ones who do the teaching. But academics tend to expect students to be like they were. When I was at university, we didn't muck about with all this, that, and the other, But they're actually the unusual ones, aren't they? So you've got to bear that in mind, that you've got to deal with all the types of students and not just the ones who are like you. And there's a tendency to teach to the ones who are going to become PhD students and forget about the rest. Some people are nodding, which is nice to see. School maths is not like maths you took. I think this is very important to think about because people tend to think, oh, school, yeah, when I was in school we did this, that, and the other, so I expect they probably know that and therefore I'll get on with it. There's a related problem actually that they found where a course wouldn't require, not many courses, if any, require further mathematics, A-level. But then students would find that they come across something they don't know and they ask the lecturer, and the lecturer says, oh, didn't you do that in further maths? Okay, so it's not a requirement, but this lecturer expects it perhaps because they're used to that being in the school curriculum, I don't know. But it's sort of interesting just to think about that. And then there's different exam boards, different module choices. There are students who didn't take A-levels, plenty of them. So to sort of plan your lectures on the basis that they might know what you knew when you arrived at university is wrong, I would say. Another question for you. What do students do when they graduate? Make more money than you do, right? Doing what? Finance, okay? Okay, some of them make less money as teachers. Finance and teaching. Anything else? Some of them become unemployed. Some of them don't do anything necessarily relevant, but some of them will go, what about, engineering, scientific research? Some of them might become statisticians. They may put off their life and do a PhD, absolutely. Some of them do, obviously. A lot of mathematicians seem to go into defence. A lot of people seem to work in defence jobs that they can't quite tell you about, which I think is very interesting. Anyway, so that sort of thing, fine. I think I plan to write these on the screen, and I haven't been, never mind. Are they ready to do that when they do that? They go into all these different fields. What skills do you think a graduate of mathematics should be able to demonstrate? Sorry? Numerical? What do you mean? I can't tell who's talking, I can't hear you. Numerical basic numeracy, numerical... Well, yes, you'd expect that of any graduate. So what do you mean solving the Goldbach conjecture? Yeah? Analytic thinking skills, thank you. What does that mean? Yeah. So, but thinking clearly, thinking analytically, it's about structuring your thoughts. We talked about writing earlier. You might expect that. Is that true of any graduate? It might be. I don't know. So to understand 15% of what's at a maths conference, okay? Being able to make ideas more precise. That's very interesting.
If you get a problem, then you can sit down and say, okay, here's how I'll define it.
So this is problem solving. This is taking a problem, defining it properly, and thinking it through. Yeah. Being able to think in more than 3 dimensions depends on the type of mathematics. Hi.
This is something which isn't going to have any economic benefit. But I would say that when you do an undergraduate,
Okay.
perhaps education of mathematics, perhaps history of mathematics as well.
Okay, so that was an understanding of what mathematics is, its philosophy, its culture, its history, its teaching it, just understand different areas,
As well
different
as sort
aspects.
of going towards, current and modern mathematics.
Yes.
I think everyone should have.
So a graduate of mathematics ought to be able to say what it is to be a mathematician.
Yeah.
Okay.
In my opinion.
Yes, yes.
I don't know.
Sorry, pardon me? To be aware of important unsolved, so big things that need solving. Yeah, I like this. This is mathematics not just as a static body of knowledge. So there's a hand here and a hand there. So
So they should probably have a decent grasp of some mathematical method. So whatever
Yeah.
courses they took, even if they didn't understand all of the theory and all of the rigorous proof behind them,
yes.
they should at least be able to apply the method.
Yeah, okay. So some mathematical methods, some of the things they've taken, not necessarily everything that they've ever learned, but I mean, there's this question where you'd say if you met someone at a party and they said they did a maths degree, and you casually mentioned proof by induction and they stared at you blankly, you'd think, well, wouldn't you? I mean, people are nodding. Okay, so there are some things that we think are very basic. Hi.
I think sort of a certain attitude to approaching the problems, maybe holding several ways of approaching a problem in your mind at once, and perhaps if you've got, I think that's very important, not just thinking there's one way of approaching something.
Yeah.
There's several ways of doing it, and perhaps thinking about which you would try first, what kind of what might be the most fruitful.
Okay, so knowing how to approach a problem, knowing multiple approaches exist, knowing which one's the best one to try. At the back, did you? Being able to understand when you're wrong and when you're right. Okay.
Why?
And why. Very good. And explaining. Yes. Hi.
Similar to that, I was thinking following a valid logical argument.
Okay. So following a valid logical, looking out for if somebody's proved that 2 squared is 8, you'll be able to work out where they've gone wrong.
Dealing with,
Sorry.
dealing with abstractions. So
Dealing with abstractions.
specific examples.
Yeah.
Being able to look at an abstract idea and work out. Well, going from examples to abstractions and vice versa.
Yeah, so going between the specific example and the abstract case.
Be able to construct mathematical models.
To be able to construct mathematical models, that's very interesting. So taking something real in the world and turning it into a mathematical problem. I might have to move on in a second, but either of you, go on.
Not needing someone to effectively babysit them in order to do a hard problem.
Okay, so not needing someone to babysit them through hard problems.
I was going to say knowing when something's subjective, so where you approach a situation where opinion matters, or knowing when it's a situation where there is an optimal solution.
Yeah, okay. So knowing when it...
No argument that, like, you can prove that there's no argument over this is the best solution,
Ooh, dear.
as opposed to here lots of people have different opinions and there are all different views about it. So I think understanding the difference between those two situations is better.
Okay, good. So understanding when there is an optimal solution and when it's a matter of opinion and different viewpoints come into it. That's very good. Is the screen all right? It turned itself off. We've talked too long. Right, let me move on. It's very interesting, but I mean, maybe you'll carry on over dinner. Right, we funded this piece of work. Some of you have picked this up because my pile has got smaller than it was this morning. We funded Jeff Warwick at Sheffield Hallam to do a project. The project was called Developing Graduate Skills in HE Mathematics Programs, Case Studies of Successful Practice. So this is looking at those sorts of things that you were talking about being able to break down a problem, being able to build a mathematical model, being able to think clearly, etc., etc. Where are we assessing these? In the man stands at the front, talks to you, you write it down, you come to the exam, you write it down. Where are we assessing all those skills that you think graduate mathematicians should have? Where are we assessing the things that make you a good PhD student? Whatever it is, whatever the reason is, where are we getting students ready for industry? So this is very interesting because some people would say that what you should do is have a module that's the skills module, and in that module you will teach them the skills that they need. Now the approach here, the philosophy here is to how can we teach mathematics, either teach it differently or assess it differently in a way that builds those skills. So you give someone a serious mathematical problem, but you give them, rather than giving them these little 6 problems a week, you give them one big problem and give them a term to solve it. That sort of project work, group work, that sort of thing. Different types of teaching and assessment, I suppose. I'll just press on. I have a couple of slides about this. I went through the introduction, and it's very interesting. You should read it. I mean, he argues that there's increasing focus on graduate skills from many different parties, government, student groups, and industry. Oh, this is sort of interesting. Do you know what the National Student Survey is? A couple of people are nodding. You can argue it's methodologically iffy for various reasons, and I don't want to have that argument now, but this is some data from the National Student Survey. On the left are 42 level 2 subjects, and on the right 106 level 3 subjects. I'm not sure I completely follow, but anyway, the important thing is, the first question is, the course has helped me present myself with confidence. Okay, on the left-hand side, mathematics is 42nd out of 42nd for students' responses to that question. Okay, the question might be subjective, but there are 3 years here. 3 different cohorts have gone through this, and they've all answered this way. And it's not measuring their actual ability in this area, it's measuring how they feel about it. This is some of the problems, but on the right-hand side, mathematics is about 101st out of 106 subjects. For that question, my communication skills have improved. Again, 42nd, bottom of the pile, 103rd or so on the right-hand side, bottom of the pile. And the third one, as a result of this course, I feel confident in tackling unfamiliar problems. Who was it over here who said, able to take something a technique that you've learned and apply it in a slightly different area? Okay, I feel confident tackling unfamiliar problems. We don't do as badly, we aren't quite bottom of the pile. But when you get a set of school kids and you're trying to convince them to take a maths degree, you say, oh, mathematics is a great degree to take. It'll make you a problem solver, an analytical thinker. It'll make you able to cope with unfamiliar problems.
Does that more reflect, they might be more aware of, like, to an English student might not know they're getting it wrong.
Yes. This is possible. I've heard this before. That's very good. I mean, I've heard this argument before, that students of other subjects may not be aware that they can't. So there might be a naivety among other subjects, which mathematicians are more aware of the reality of the situation. It's possible.
I didn't mean to pick on English, I'm sorry.
No. Actually, it's quite interesting. The last person who said that to me also picked on English. Right. Hand over there and then hand over here. So.
Perhaps maths graduates have an awareness of just how hard unfamiliar problems.
Yes. So they might have an awareness of how hard unfamiliar problems might be. So. Yes, confidence, not competence. That's a good point. But it is how they are feeling as they're entering. So if they decide to go, I mean, they've now got to go and get a job. If the job says you'll be tackling a lot of unfamiliar problems, they don't feel confident in that sort of thing. So maybe they go into something that they're more familiar with. So, hi.
I guess the people entering mathematics degree,
Yep.
I mean, are a very different group of people to the group of people entering an English degree, for example.
Yeah, so the intake is different in different subjects.
I mean, it's only a fair statistic if you ask the same question at school.
Yes, where are we now? I've had an interesting conversation with somebody on Twitter this week about he has a competition at his university where the Students' Union are running a which is the best course survey. Okay? You can only vote for it. I said to him, when I was at university, there was a pub around the corner from me, and as you walked in, they handed you a voting form and a pint, and they won Nottingham Pub of the Year. Surprise, surprise. And actually, he came back a couple of days later, and he said, I've just seen this question on Facebook. Which hurts more, being kicked in the balls or giving birth? Okay? They're all things where you can't compare the two. You can't say, I have taken an English degree and a mathematics degree, and this one was better than that one. It's a fair point, I think. Go on.
But I've never taken it. As I understand it, when sort of like English and philosophy, mostly you'll study something and write essays on it. So you have a way of solving problems, whether it's reading and writing.
Yeah, okay.
But whereas maths, you'll have sort of group theory and graph theory and differential equations. So we have a lot of very different tools that we use.
Yes.
So
And different sorts of problems, I suppose.
Not so surprising that people are not confident
Mm.
in unfamiliar problems, because we've got lots of different ways of tackling problems.
Okay, so in mathematics there are loads of techniques for approaching different problems. In English, you've sort of got a standard, you're going to research it, you're going to read around it, you're going to get some opinions. 2 more hands up. So, sorry, yes.
Maybe in maths you get quite used to the fact that you're wrong a lot of the time, whereas if you're in English you can say, I can write it in a nice convincing way, have the quotes here and there, and I'm right.
This is related to your banging your head against the wall comment, that you're wrong a lot of the time. I had somebody tell me that mathematicians must be very depressed because they fail, finally solve it and go, hey, and then move on to the next problem. Fail. Spend 98% of the time feeling like a failure. Yeah. So, sorry, you had...
That's interesting to say. Those statistics are also only interesting if you tell us what the top statistic is, I think, because that's okay.
So you want to know the spread. You want to know that all other 40 whatever subjects are not 1% higher or whatever. Yes, this is true. Yes, this is true. I mean, you can get that. I don't have that available. Go on, one last one, and then I'll move on. That's a useful timer, that, when the screen time's out.
Yeah.
If you can't remember, then that's okay. We can come back.
I'm sure it's a wonderful.
Oh, I'm sure. Okay, so it's interesting. It's interesting as well that you're all...
I do remember.
Go on.
Just, like, the more you learn in mathematics, undoubtedly, the more you realise you don't know anything. Because it's just such a big subject, you know? Like, the more you learn, you're just like, right, I don't know. So you leave with a degree.
Yes.
God, I know nothing.
So the more you learn, the more you realise you don't know. But is that unique in mathematics?
I would say somehow.
Somehow, yes. Okay. So it's very interesting that you've all taken, or those of you who've spoken have taken the approach, this is obviously wrong, and mathematics is unique and special and needs treating differently. I think that's interesting. But that's quite common. People tend to do that. I mean, it's... Sorry. The more you look, the less you see. Very good. Anyway, I'm going to move on. Right. Where are we? This is from the blurb on the back of the booklet. I should have said, at the end, there are plenty of these. You can take one. Please do, because I don't want to carry them home. There are significant barriers involved in seeking to modify mathematics programs to encourage the development of graduate skills. One is the practical difficulty of finding space for graduate skill development in a crowded curriculum. This is what I was saying. This can be addressed, at least in part, through different approaches to learning, teaching, and assessment that allows skills development to take place alongside the development of mathematical skills and by encouraging students to take part in extracurricular activities. So earlier on I was talking about not rejecting the mathematics, and somebody else mentioned extracurricular activities is where you may be able to get this sort of thing. The booklet, in the introduction, he sort of classifies graduate skills into work-based, work-related learning, reflection, planning, that sort of thing, career management, and then general employability skills, teamwork and communication. Autonomy is interesting. This is something that you've talked about. People should be able to work on their own. Self-awareness. But self-awareness is very important because the student might be very capable but not be able to express it, and then when they come to write their CV, they're rubbish. So anyway, and then he says that each of the case studies fit into one of these categories. So the booklet is there. Please help yourself. We're also running a series of workshops. If you're interested in this topic, Jeff himself is leading these workshops. There's going to be plenty of time for discussion of some of the issues that come up in trying to do this sort of teaching. It's not unknown to do this sort of teaching, but it's still, I think, unusual. So it's interesting to learn about that sort of thing. There is funding available if anybody is currently teaching and wants to take up some of the ideas from the booklet. You can bid for £1,000 from us to support you in doing that. These workshops are York, Manchester, Bath, Cardiff, Greenwich and Birmingham, so I'd say all over. The National HE STEM programme operates in England and Wales, which is why there aren't any Scottish or Northern Irish ones, so apologies to anyone who's in from those. Right, a couple of the case studies I'm just going to draw out. One is case study 12, which, isn't it lovely? We've had two people already talk about mathematical writing and structuring your thoughts, so you've basically said what's on this slide. This is from Kevin Houston at Leeds, who's very interested in this sort of area. Teaching students to write in a more orderly and logical way has numerous advantages. It makes marking easier. Okay, very practical. We're trying to attract people to come to this workshop that we're running. It allows students to demonstrate their understanding or not. There's a bit of an issue that students will write, I'm going to do a very simple example, but if you do 3x equals 6 equals x equals 2, is that right? Does that get the marks? No, if it was a script and you're seeing hundreds of them, would you just, yeah, it's basically they've got the idea. Okay, but they're trading off your intelligence in interpreting that answer rather than having expressed it correctly. And it can get much more complicated than that. That's just a very simple example. Forces an improvement in their thinking skills. A couple of people here said this, that by ordering your writing properly, ordering your mathematics properly, you're more able to work your way through it, you're more able to see where you've made a mistake. So I think this is an interesting area. Expressing ideas clearly and correctly is a valuable skill for graduates in further study, employment and life in general. So we're running this workshop on the 12th of May at Leeds, and you're most welcome to come to this. Industry, here's a big question. Where are we? 7:10. Do you have any experience of employers being involved in the curriculum? So this might be people coming in from industry to deliver lectures or to set work, or people going out from university to work in companies. I mean, some places have placement years. Okay, rare, by pure maths, do you mean straight mathematics, not like pure and applied? You mean a BSc Honours Mathematics degree? That would be rare. Okay. Okay, so final. Did you say final year? Yeah. Final year undergraduates going into schools for weeks. Did you say, or? Okay, but to get an idea of how teaching works if they want to go into teaching. They do some lessons, okay, that's good. But that's all. This is something that mathematics isn't great at as a subject. There are degrees where you do work placements, whether they're summer ones, whether they're year-long ones, 2 hours a week, something like that. You know, different things can be done, but it's not done very much. It's sort of interesting. Okay, so there's an option. So there is an option to do a year in industry, but not many, but you've got to do a lot of work to make that happen.
It's not like, for example, the Erasmus program where you go abroad every year.
Yeah.
People do that every year, probably the other people do that every year.
Yes.
So you can talk to people who do it before, whereas I honestly don't know if anyone who's done a year in industry.
Okay, so people who take a year abroad, there are far more of them, you can talk to them. And presumably if 10 of you have gone, when you come back, you're a friendship group still, whereas if you're just one person going off. No, the year, if you come back the year after. A lot of people, if you're the one person who goes into industry and then comes back, then perhaps you don't know anyone, is what I was. But this is something that, the HESM program is interested in engaging with employers and in getting more employer input into the curriculum, and it's interesting how little this really happens. So I just thought I'd ask you, but it's a bit of a trick question.
Sometimes you can be a bit of a choice between, with something like that, would you want to do a year in industry or would you want to do an NMath degree? Because I know, like, if you did an NMath with an intercalated year in industry, that would be a 5-year degree program, and you get a student loan for that.
Oh, interesting. So if you take a year in industry with an M-Math, you wouldn't get a student loan?
Yes, even though you probably wouldn't be paying fees for your year in industry.
You often do, actually, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Okay. But nobody's been in a lecture delivered by an employer? Not just a careers talk, but a lecture, nobody? Go on, one little hand's coming up. Hello. Yes?
I had a statistics lecture that was given, well, was a guest lecturer from the finance industry.
Okay, good. So a guest lecture in statistics given by someone from the finance industry. And it was statistical content, it wasn't just, here's what it's like to come and work with us. Good. Where was that?
Warwick.
Warwick, yeah. Hi.
I think at Leicester there was a brief lecture on computer graphics by some rare computer games company, but that was one lecture.
Okay, so one lecture at Leicester from a computer games company. This is not overwhelming, these examples. But anyway, right, let me press on. So case study 13 in the booklet is a chap called Edmund Chadwick. I realised Kevin had doctor, and Edmund is also a doctor, so I'll throw a doctor in. His project, assessing student teams to developing mathematical models applied to business and industrial mathematics, which sounds very sort of generic. What he did was he had a seminar series given by guest lecturers from industry who would come in. So every week for the autumn term, somebody came in from industry and talked about how I use mathematics in my job with real examples of what they did. The one I saw was a lady from DSTL, which was very tiptoeing around. She works on stealth aircrafts that you might see in 35 years, so she couldn't say very much, but interesting stuff anyway. And then he's got an industry-style group project, so a group where there's a chair and there's a director of research and a director of writing it up, I can't quite remember. And some of the employer partners who've come and delivered the talks are going to come back and get involved in the assessment and feedback process. So the students are going to present their solutions to the employers, who are then going to comment on them, on how well they've done, and give them some feedback, which I think is very interesting. The employers aren't yet helping set the problems. They're not real problems from industry. They're things that Edmund has made up, but he's hoping to get that going in future years. I mean, this is very good because the feedback from the students and from the employers is very good. And I mean, this hopefully will lead to a long-term relationship between that university and those employers, which is brilliant, you know. So that's an example. Mathematical thinking, we talked a little bit about structuring your thoughts and mathematical thinking. There's some interesting work going on at Greenwich, where they've, for the last year, I think, run a lunchtime, once a week lunchtime, what they're calling a maths cafe, where students come along and there are puzzles and games, but they're specifically chosen to develop mathematical thinking, strategic thinking, to develop that sort of, and it's a bring your homework, get some help sort of session, so it's a peer support thing as well. So we've funded a project at Greenwich to carry this on, to expand its use, because it's only been with first years in mathematics at the moment. They're going to try it in maths for other subjects, engineering and things like that, and also with other years within mathematics. And we're running a workshop developing mathematical thinking through problems, puzzles and games, 1st of July at Greenwich, led by Nolan Bradshaw. So we have a few speakers who are going to come in and say, this is how I've used this sort of thing. Problems, I'm saying small problems, sort of not quite puzzles, but not quite what you think of as maths problems, I suppose. Puzzles and games to enrich on the undergraduate curriculum and engage students by developing problem-solving and strategic thinking skills. So this is this sort of thing. I asked you before, where is this sort of thing developed? And the answer is nowhere. Well, here's somewhere. This is in lectures, this is in maths support, and this is in extracurricular activities. So it's all of these things. The example at Greenwich is a lunchtime club, so that's an extracurricular thing, but Nolan, who does it, also uses puzzles and things in her lectures, trying to get the students going as well. But it's interesting. It's interesting to think about what you can try and do if you're going to produce these graduates that you've all told me that you want. How are you actually going to go about it? Well, if you come along on the 1st of July, we'll try and tell you. And we should be able to send you away with some practical stuff you can use as well. That's the idea. Right, when do I need to stop? Does somebody want to tell me? Should I 1:30, okay. Martine told me earlier that I'd asked for 45 minutes, which I'd forgotten. But anyway, I was going to rush through this or not, depending on how much you'd spoken. You've spoken a lot, so that's good. So we ran a summit, a HE Mathematics Curriculum Summit, in January. We invited the head of maths at all the maths departments in England and Wales. About half of them came or sent a representative. Okay, so there are about 54 in England and Wales. This is departments who are offering a G100 mathematics degree. And about half of them came along. And we also got education representatives from Institute of Maths and its Applications, the Royal Statistical Society, the OR Society. So those are sort of the professional bodies. And the Council for the Mathematical Sciences, which is an umbrella organisation representing those three with the LMS and the Edinburgh Mathematical Society. People from the HE STEM programme, Sigma, which is a math support network, and the MSOR network, which is my employer, and a few individuals. Anyway, for a good day of debate and discussion, and that's what I'm coming to now. This is sort of the structure of the day. We open with a debate. We believe memory, subject knowledge, and technical fluency remain vital for undergraduate mathematicians in the digital age. It's interestingly worded, and not many people are likely to vote against it. But it got people going. That was the idea of it. So on the one hand, we had somebody who's arguing that mathematicians do need to remember theorems and spit them out in exams and that sort of thing. And on the other hand, we had somebody who was arguing that really that bit of actually doing the mathematics, I mean, when you go into industry, you aren't given an hour and given no books and left to it, and if you haven't come up with a solution, then you can't build that bridge, you know. This isn't really how you work. And also, a lot of mathematics is this business of finding a real problem, turning it into a mathematical problem, solving it, and then turning it back into the real scenario and presenting it back to the person who's given it to you. And the solving it bit can sometimes, often be done with computers rather than with people. So that was sort of, anyway. Then we broke into 3 discussion groups. So the first one, we can't let them graduate unless. Okay, which is this question I asked you at the start about what's a graduate, what would you feel embarrassed if a mathematician you taught didn't know when they graduated, that sort of thing. So that came up with a list of sort of topics that we expect that a graduate should have some grasp of, I suppose. Number 2, if math students can't communicate in writing or speak in public, is that my problem? Okay, the group decided it was, and then wondered what they could do about it. Okay, but this is a problem if students can't put themselves across. I zipped in and out of these sessions. One interesting comment just as I came into that session, somebody said, in industry, the people who can stand up and present the ideas to the managers are the people who are going to get promoted. And the people behind the scenes, who are the mathematicians doing the work, aren't going to get noticed if they can't stand up and fight their corner. That is interesting. And then the third one, if most maths graduates aren't confident in handling unfamiliar problems, should we care? Okay, so not accepting the data, but if it's true, should we care? And there was a lot of talk about how little, really, this business of taking a technique, you basically are taught a technique and then in the exam you see problems that are very much like the ones you've seen in problem classes and lectures and coursework and so forth. And how often are we assessing students on using that technique but in an unfamiliar area? Until possibly the dissertation and then certainly the PhD. Suddenly thrown in at the deep end, you know. So it's sort of, anyway. So those are the 3 discussion groups. Sure.
I just have to make a point about number 2. So some people are naturally very shy.
Yes.
And can't really speak in public.
Yes.
Nevertheless can do very good mathematics.
Yes. So some people are shy, can't speak in public, but can do good mathematics. Also, you've got to look at the types of people that you're attracting to your degree. Maybe people like that are more tending towards mathematics, and maybe that's not a problem. People do get by perfectly well. But usually, people end up if they go into a graduate training program or something like that, they have a bit of a baptism by fire to get them up to speed on this sort of thing, I think. Yes?
But at least they should be able to communicate in writing. Even if
yes.
they will be able to put together a good, well-worded report.
Yeah.
And if they do communicate in public, they should be able to use, a slideshow.
Yes.
That sort of thing.
So they should be able to
Help them a lot.
produce a good structured report and use something like these slides to try and help them through giving a presentation, even if they aren't brilliant at it, because a lot of it is practice, I think. But they should at least be on the way on that journey, I suppose. Writing reports is an interesting phrase as well, because again, we don't get students to do that very much, do we? The exam, the coursework, none of it's very discursive. Anyway. Where are we? In the afternoon, a chap called Jeremy Liversley from Leicester gave a talk about assessment that was quite interesting. And Neil Challis gave a talk, what do students think about their degrees? Neil's one of the authors of the Black Book here, so he presented some of the findings from that book, interesting as they are. And then we got the 3 discussion groups back together to give some recommendations for targeting support for curriculum development, financial support, because my project has money to spend in this area. So I'll come to that in a second. We've made a findings report. The manuscript you can get online, and it says there it's currently being prepared for printing. What I mean by that is it went to the printers yesterday, I think, so it's quite possible that it is printed but not yet cut up and folded and stapled. But I'm hoping to have it next week. That's what it's going to look like. So this gives summaries of each of the sessions and summaries of the key findings. Now this just does a very useful thing for me because it helps me plan the next bit of my project. But I'm hoping also that having got together heads of mathematics, all their representatives from half of the universities in the country and asked them some serious questions about it, I'm hoping it'll be a good record of the current state of maths education. There's some really interesting stuff in there, particularly in the discussion sessions. So, it might be worth a read anyway. Is it going to go to the next one? Right, and then we have this funding call. This may or may not interest you because you may or may not be in a position to do anything about it. But my project's running until July 2012, so this funding is for the next academic year. Basically, the summit made this set of recommendations for prioritising this funding, and these have been taken forward in, it says 3rd call. We had 2 calls that were small scale, and this is the big push to assign this money to things that are useful. So I spoke at the heads of departments of mathematical sciences have a conference every year, and I spoke at this last year, and I said, look, this is money that is available for you for things that you have told us that need doing. Please bid for it. So we'll see what happens. The call's open until the 13th of May. There are a series of work briefs based on summit outcomes. There's also open calls. So if you feel like you've got an idea that doesn't fit the ones in the brief, you can bid for any sort of project you like. I'm not saying you'll get it, but you can bid. These are the amounts. I think this is the slide I would have talked a lot about if you guys hadn't spoken much at the start. So, but I mentioned the graduate skills booklet projects being £1,000. Some of these are up to £50,000. So some of them are, there's a whole range of different things. If you're involved in that sort of area, I have just a few copies of the funding call documentation, and it's on the web. But if you come and see me afterwards, I can give you a copy of that. How to find out more, talk to me. Okay. Now, I'm running meetings. We've done the ones in Cardiff and Greenwich already. There are 4 more coming up, York, Birmingham, Manchester and Bath, where people can come along and talk to me about their ideas. I can talk to them about what the call is, what the projects are in a bit more detail, and they can ask questions about it and try and also you might, if you're a lecturer somewhere and you don't feel like you can quite take on one of these by yourself, you might meet someone at one of these meetings who will collaborate with you, etc., etc. And I'm here all 3 days. So if you want to talk to me, talk to me. Last thing, this is an event that we're just starting to advertise. We've just set this up. It's a slightly, I don't know, it's my little odd idea, but we're going to do a residential weekend for lecturers. This is people who have time to care about their teaching and learning, so they don't need their time buying out. And maybe they have an idea. I mean, you might, as a new lecturer, you might have tried something and it's worked and you want to tell people about it, or you might want to try something but never have quite had time. And what I want you to do in that case is to come along to this, spend 5 minutes just telling people your idea, and then we'll break out into, there'll be 3 people in each hour, 5 minutes each telling you their idea, and then we'll break into 3 groups, you'll discuss it all. If you find, I think we need about half the people to present an idea and half the people to be willing to accept ideas, basically. But you will present your idea, you'll go and sit down, you'll have a good natter with some people who've taken to your idea, and then maybe 2 or 3 of you might decide to go ahead. And there's a little bit of funding available for, you might need to meet up again, you might want to run a workshop to share what you found, you might need a bit of equipment, things like that, but little bits of money. If you've got a bigger project, then my funding call is open, so. Right. I think that's about it. Tomorrow, same time, same place. This talk was rather grandly titled Innovation in Mathematics, HE Teaching and Learning, and tomorrow's is Technology. If you're interested by all this stuff that's going on, and whether it can be used to do mathematics, yes it can, and various other things, then come along tomorrow, same time, same place, and we'll do that. Last but not least, I have a stall. There you are. Come and see me on my stall, definitely. Although it won't have this pile of blue booklets here, because they're there and you're all going to take them with you, aren't you? Yes. Thank you very much. That's my name, my Twitter name, my email address, and the website where you can find out details of all these workshops and funding calls and all that stuff. So thank you ever so much. It's 25 past. If anyone has any questions, fire away.